now I'd like to talk about RFID in perspective. So this is our 15th year, and I actually very rarely speak at our events, at least on the main stage, because we try to get end users who are going to talk about their solutions. And but this year I thought, well, since it's 15 years, maybe it's time to kind of look back at where we were and maybe talk about where we are and talk about where we're going. So that's what I'd like to do. And I'm going to give a little bit of background. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things and how that term came out. I'm going to give two examples, and I do apologize to the folks at Macy's and particularly to Rick Lewis from Delta. Rick, I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder. I know you're speaking later, but I'm going to share some great statistics that you've shared with us over the years or in the last few months. I'm going to talk a little bit of the technology adoption life cycle. It's the most important slide in my deck. I show it every time I give a presentation. It is, to me, the explanation of where we are, where we're going, and what you need to know about the future of RFID. So I'm going to talk about the potential size of the market and then what you should do if you're an end user in any industry to prepare for what's coming. So a little bit of history. Back in 2002, when I first got interested in RFID, it was virtually unheard of. To be honest, I used to call people up and say, my name is Mark Roberti, I'm the editor of RFID Journal, and RFID companies would laugh. They would say, you found the smallest niche in the world to exploit. And I said, well, it's small now, but I don't think it's going to stay small. In fact, I'm sure it's not going to stay small, and I'm committed to this space. So at the time, there was no passive UHF technology. There were a couple of companies like Savvy Technology that offered active RFID, but not a whole lot of companies. And there were, I did a story for the industry standard. I interviewed 60 people for my article, and I think I pretty much hit everybody in the industry at that time. It was very, very small. But then there was this group at MIT that decided that they wanted to put a passive UHF tag, a simple tag with a serial number on everything that's manufactured in the world. And the guys at MIT are ambitious, right? I mean, they really have big dreams. So Sanjay Sarma, who is in many ways the father of RFID, and David Brock came up with this idea, a cheap, passive tag that could go on everything and could be disposed of with the thing you've made. And Kevin Ashton, who worked as a brand manager at Procter & Gamble and who was having trouble restocking his lipstick in stores because they were selling out and weren't being replenished and was frustrated by this, he heard about RFID and he got GS1 and Procter & Gamble and Gillette to pony up some money to support this research into the electronic product code. And the vision was, and when I met Kevin in, I think it was September of 2001 at MIT, the vision, he said, is one day everything will be tracked, and I first identified with RFID, tracked and managed. And he coined the term, it will be an Internet of Things. So at the time, this is 2001, so it's the early days of the internet, right? So Amazon was getting hot and companies were all talking about the internet and everybody was buzzing about it and corporations were just starting to really get websites put up. And Kevin was trying to connect what was going on with the internet to what he saw as the potential of RFID. And he said, we can connect every object on the planet to the internet so that we can track and manage it. And I left MIT, and my head was spinning. My mind was blown. And I just thought, this makes so much sense, right? Because when you think about computer technology, what we do with computers is we track and manage digital stuff. We enter information in the computer, and we massage that information, and we make reports of that information. But computers know nothing about the real world. And Kevin said, we will give computers the ability to see the real world in real time and know everything that's going on. And I thought, man, this is great. So a funny thing happened, an odd thing. I was working at the industry standard, then the .com Bible, and I was writing about RFID, and the .com world blew up, and I was unemployed. And I said, okay, if this is really going to be a big thing, then people are going to need information about it. And what do, Mark? You make information. That's your job. You write about stuff. So I bought a little book on how to write HTML code. I bought some software, and I purchased a $9.99 a month hosting package, and I put up a website. And a funny thing happened. People started coming. They were interested in this because they had business problems, and RFID could solve them. They could track their stuff with this, and they were researching it, and they were finding me. And I said, this is a real business. This is potential. So we started it. We launched our event the next year, RFID Journal Live. The first one was held in 2003 in Chicago. And I don't want to go too much into the history, but here we are today where we have all this technology, all these RFID tags. We've got LF, HF, UHF, active. I talked about it today earlier. And then we have this new thing or reinvented thing called the Internet of Things. So everybody's now talking about the Internet of Things, but they're not necessarily talking about it in the way that Kevin talked about it. They're not saying, okay, we're going to put low-cost tags on every chair, every shoe, every shirt. They're talking about connecting toasters and microwave ovens and refrigerators to the Internet. And that's great, and that's cool, and that's powerful. So there's these two kind of versions of the Internet of Things that are a little bit not meshing right now. But generally, the way I see it, it's all part of the same thing, right? So what we want to do is we want to put radios on everything and communicate back and forth. Send information to those things and get information back without people being involved, right? So the key to the Internet of Things is it's wireless, it's connective, it's two-way, and there's no people involved. That's a critical point of it. And the way I tell people, or I talk to people about this, I'm not a big believer in specific definitions of technology. I believe that we're looking for business solutions, and if it's technically not RFID, or if it's technically not IoT, who cares if it solves your problem and it all does basically the same stuff? Right? And what does IoT stuff do? To me, it gives you information about the real world so that you can do something with your business better than you're doing it today. So it's telling you where your inventory is, or it's telling you that your HVAC equipment is too hot, right? And that might mean that some bearings need to be replaced. And you can go do preventive maintenance, and you can keep that uptime. GE aircraft engines, they have commercials talking about their aircraft engines and their planes. And so you have airplanes in real time with sensors telling people on the ground how that aircraft engine's performing. And if there's a problem, if it's not performing optimally, they can have somebody waiting on the ground to take care of the problem so that the next flight it's back up and running optimally again. Terrific stuff. It's not RFID, it is IoT. So IoT is part of a bigger framework of the Internet of Things. And the way I look at this, or the way I divide this in my mind is, if it has power, you're going to put something on it that's a two-way radio with more capability, so a Zigbee sensor or a Wi-Fi sensor or Wi-Fi capability, right? But think about all the things in your business that have no power. Your tools generally don't have power, your hand tools, right? Jigs don't have power. Boxes of parts don't have power. So you're going to use an RFID tag to track those things. So RFID is one part of this larger thing that we call the Internet of Things. So Bluetooth, Zigbee used on all things with power sources. At consumer level, you got your appliances all have power. You can certainly put a Zigbee device or Wi-Fi connect or Bluetooth, whatever in there. Passive is going to be used for the things without power. And of course, the vast majority of things in the world have no power. Carlo Nizam is the head of value chain visibility at at Airbus. And he and I talk a lot about this. And he says, you know, when you look at Airbus and you look at all the things we have in the production facility, 90%, 95% have no power source. So we need to use passive RFID or an active RFID tag, which has its own power source. This slide, you know, may sound a little bit like hyperbole, but I believe this. I believe this absolutely. RFID is as important as the internal combustion engine, electricity, the microchip, computers, and the internet. These are seminal technologies that have transformed the way we live. And I believe that RFID is as important as these technologies. And I mean RFID broadly, the Internet of Things, because it extends the microchip, the computer, the internet to the physical world. And it will allow computers to control the physical world in a way we've never had before. It breaks down the wall between the physical and the digital world. And that is a very, very powerful thing. And I'm going to give a couple of examples. So first, let me explain why I think it's so important. So it enables the tracking of unique items, physical items, which we don't do very well today. It requires little or no labor cost. So again, no human interaction. So we're going to get this information, and we're going to be able to do things and act on it without a lot of extra labor involved. It allows you to capture massive amounts of data very quickly and cost effectively. If you've heard me speak before, you know this is my pet peeve. I hear people say that barcodes are cheaper than RFID. And it kind of drives me bonkers when I hear people say that. The data carrier, the actual barcode that you print, is cheaper than the data carrier, the RFID transponder. I'll give you that. But that's meaningless. What's meaningful is, what does it cost you to get the information off the data carrier? And with a barcode, you have to have someone scan it every time. With RFID, it just reads. Labor's expensive. People scanning is expensive. If barcodes were cheaper than RFID, why don't stores take inventory with barcodes every day? Why do they do it twice a year? Because barcodes are really expensive. So you can capture data cost effectively, and it enables companies to have the data that allows them to manage much more effectively. There's a cover story. I was walking through the airport and I was looking at magazines. The Economist has a cover of their current issue. It says, the most valuable resource on Earth is data. And I think that's true. So a couple of examples of the power of RFID. And these are very small, narrow examples that, when multiplied by everything, become enormously powerful. So Macy's began using RFID back in 2012. At the time, their inventory accuracy in their store was about 65%, which is industry standard, very common, nothing unusual there. Macy's decided to start using RFID to try to improve their inventory accuracy. They can now read using an RFID reader, handheld reader, walking around, not even fixed infrastructure, 7,000 items per man-hour versus 200 to 500 with barcodes. That's a pretty significant improvement in productivity in the data collection area. 7,000 versus 200 to 500. Also, RFID is about 95, 98% accurate. Barcode is about 80% accurate. So if you ask people to scan 10,000 items with a barcode, they're going to be off by about 15, 20%, right? With RFID, you're probably going to get 95, 99% of those. So now they take inventory once a month. They could do it twice a month. They could do it every week. They choose based on what they think is most valuable. They get enough data, doing it once a month to get their inventory accuracy up to better than 95%. I've been on panels with Pam Sweeney and Bill Connell, and they said, well, why stop at 95%? Don't you need 100%? And they said, no, we feel from a business point of view, the extra labor you would cost to get you up to 99% is not really worth the value. We feel that we're getting the most value here at doing it once a month. Sometimes they'll do cycle counts for specific areas of the store if necessary, but they get it up to 95% accurate. So inventory accuracy is now at 95%. So they're selling more in the departments with RFID than they're selling in other stores. Well, all the stores have RFID, but the departments that don't have RFID, because when you come in and you want to buy something, it's where it's supposed to be, and you actually wind up buying it. Many, many times people go into a store, they're looking for a specific thing, they don't find it, they don't buy it, but not only do they not buy that, they also don't buy anything else. So research shows that typically if a customer goes into a store to buy a specific item, they often pick up a secondary item that they weren't planning to buy, but you lose both sales if you don't have the stuff in the right place. So as I said, sales go up, and RFID is also enabling Macy's to do true omni-channel retailing. So they know where their inventory is, and they are exposing all their inventory to customers online. A lot of stores don't expose their inventory, and I won't talk too much about this because Bill Hargrave is going to go into some depth about this, but they expose their inventory, and if they have it in the store, they're comfortable selling it on the web because they know they can take it out of the store, take it offline, put it away for someone to come and pick it up later, and they're doing a good job doing that. So the point here is that RFID is enabling Macy's not just to scan way more items in an hour. It's enabling them to do other things, have the product in the right place at the right time, and sell to the customer however the customer wants to sell. You can pick up your phone, buy on your phone in Macy's, and they'll have the item there. That's how confident they are that their stuff is where they think it is. Very few retailers are in that position right now. Delta is another great example, and as I said, Rick Lewis is speaking tomorrow, so if you want to get more depth about this, Rick can share that with you. But it used to take, without RFID, 53 man-hours to check the expiration dates of oxygen canisters on a 757. So without RFID, 53 man-hours. With RFID, 45 seconds. I defy anybody to tell me there's other technology out there that's currently delivering that kind of productivity improvement. That's massive. But again, it's not just about collecting the data more quickly and saving some man-hours. I mean, that's not unimportant, but that's not the only thing. So the 99.8% reduction means more than just efficiencies in collecting information. It means being able to collect information without impacting your operations. So before, if it takes 53 man-hours, well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that Delta doesn't want to keep those planes on the ground for 53 hours and count the canisters every day, right? They want their planes in the air. But if you can do it in 45 seconds, you can collect the information without slowing down the flight at all. While they're cleaning the plane, one of the maintenance guys can walk through and collect all that information. So what? Who cares? Well, Delta cares because it means they have more accurate and timely information about how many canisters will expire next week, next month, next year, next 5 years. And they can plan. And that's what's important. They can make good business decisions, right? They can remove the canisters as they're closer to expiration, which saves them money. So instead of taking something off that's going to expire in 4 months because you don't know when you're going to see that airplane again, you have information that allows you to take it off within, say, 2 weeks of its expiration, saving a lot of money. Delta can order canisters they need for the coming month, so they don't have to keep a lot of extra canisters on hand to make sure they have them when they need them. They can plan in advance. That reduces inventory costs, and it reduces working capital. all good things, right? I'm just talking about one tiny application in an airline that could do this across lots of different applications. In fact, we have another speaker talking about baggage tracking at Delta. So this is an innovative company that's using RFID in new ways and getting enormous value from it. So where are we? Okay, supply chain benefits. So not only does Delta benefit, but Delta's supply chain benefits. So they can tell the canister providers how many canisters they're going to need next month, in the next 6 months. Those guys can then plan their operations, and they can be more efficient because they know what their big customer is going to need, and they can be ready to supply it. And obviously, they can share that information with their suppliers, and those guys can be ready. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the value of the data is enormous. The ability to collect the data with RFID is dramatically improved with RFID. And these are single applications where if you imagine everything in your company is like an oxygen canister at Delta or a suit at Macy's, you know where it is, you know what's the state of it, you know what you want to do with it, you can plan, you can think about what business decisions make the most sense, and you can be far more efficient. So in my view, we're at the beginning, right? I mean, we've been doing this 15 years, and that seems like a very long time. But when you look at the adoption of the barcode, it took equally long to get to what one would consider the beginning. So the first barcode scan, I believe, was 1966, 1967, on a pack of Wrigley's gum somewhere in the Midwest. And then barcodes didn't take off in retail until 1982, 1983, when Walmart and Kmart decided to adopt them en masse, and then everybody started using barcodes. So from 66 to 84, you know, it takes time for technologies to incubate. It takes time for them to improve. It takes time for them to get to the point where you can walk down an airplane with a handheld and capture all that information in 45 seconds. It's real. It works really well now, and we're at the beginning. We're at the beginning because people now are able to start tagging everything and start thinking about tagging everything to reduce waste, to boost efficiencies, and to improve people's lives. This is the most important slide. I show it every time I speak. This is from Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. Many of you have heard that book. It's an extremely famous book. It talks about how new technologies are adopted. And what Jeffrey said, and he's a brilliant guy. He's spoken at RFID Journal events, and we've interviewed him a few times. Brilliant guy. There was a model of technology adoption which said, you know, there was kind of a smooth path. Some people started adopting, then more people adopted, then more, then you got to critical mass, and then the technology became obsolete and fewer people used it, and it petered out. That was the technology adoption life cycle. And Jeffrey Moore said, he was a venture capitalist, he was funding companies, and he said, if that's true, how come good companies with good technology get customers, and then suddenly the market dries up and they go out of business? Why does that keep happening? Why do good companies with good technology hit this wall and go out of business? And so he started to investigate and think about why that is. And what he determined is that there is a chasm between the early adopter, the innovative company, the company that's excited about new technology and taking new risks and doing new things, and the vast majority of companies which want a proven solution and don't want to take a risk and don't, frankly, want to spend a lot of time working with a solution provider to help them fix their product and the things that, or develop their product in a way that will finally deliver value. And so what he said was, you get early adopters and there's a lot of excitement about technology and everybody's excited and there's news stories saying it's going to change the world, and then suddenly people discover, yeah, it's not so easy. and they start to write negative stories, and they start to say negative things about the technology, and the average company says, you know what, I don't think that's fully baked, I'm not going to use it. The market dries up, some companies go under. And why I believe this is so important is I see this every day. I report on RFID every day. We write stories every day. This is what happened. Right? We had early excitement. We had Walmart. We had the DoD and a bunch of people saying, hey, this is the greatest technology. We had stories saying this was the end of the barcode. Everything. It all happened. And then the market dried up. And the only companies left in the market were the companies that had a serious business problem and were willing to take a risk on a technology that they said was relatively new and unproven at the time. And even in the days when RFID was in the chasm, we had people at this event. We had people who came not because they saw this as an innovative technology that was going to solve all the world's problems, but because they had a problem that no other technology was going to solve. And so the way you get out of the chasm with the new technology is these companies show the way. They say, look, even though this is a relatively new technology, I'm spending $1 million a year to replace my containers, and I don't want to do that anymore. I'm willing to take a chance. I'm willing to work with a solution provider to develop the tags that will work, to develop the readers that will work, and they start coming out of the chasm. And we're well out of the chasm now. So RFID is well across the chasm. We have really good solutions now, and we've proven that there's lots of business cases. You go to any of the sessions tomorrow, you'll hear great applications of RFID. You'll hear about people saving money, making money, improving the way they do business. So what needs to happen for RFID to become a mass adoption technology is to reach critical mass. When a large enough number of companies in a single industry are using that technology, then overnight everybody starts to use it. There's a line in Geoffrey Moore's book, which I'll never forget. I was reading the book, and he said, when this happens, when you hit critical mass, he said, suddenly the technology nobody wanted, everybody has to have. Overnight. Changes like that. And my point in bringing this out is not to say that tomorrow RFID is going to take off. But it is worth noting that this will happen, and you will have to adopt the technology if you're in that industry at that time, and eventually you will have to adopt it anyway. Why not be prepared for it? What I saw in the internet days, when this happened in the internet, I was covering the internet, and what happened was there were innovators and there were people, and we hit critical mass, and suddenly everybody wanted to adopt internet technologies, and companies were throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars down the tubes. Does anybody remember the online marketplaces? There was one for the auto industry. There's still one for the apparel industry. It still exists, World Retail Exchange. But they were dumping money into this stuff like it didn't matter. You know, 50 million, 100 million, it all got wasted. It all got wasted. And to me, that's terrible. I don't want to see companies waste money. I don't want to see this technology explode and the companies that are behind suddenly throwing money at the technology, trying to get the solution to work. I want to see companies take a smart, steady approach, adopt the technology in a smart way. And that's why we spend so much effort to highlight the stories, to have the case studies, to show the people like Delta and Macy's that are doing it right, so you can follow that and say, hey, that's the way we're going to do that. So critical mass is building, the technology is getting closer, and we're nearing the tipping point. Adoption is going to explode, and I believe retail will be first. I believe the number of retail stores in the US means that RFID, if it just was in retail, which it won't be, if it was just in retail alone, it would be a massive technology with a massive impact on our economy. So here's a few numbers to consider. There are 286,000 apparel, footwear, and accessory stores just in the United States. Forget about global. My slides are out of order. 246,000 pharmacy, personal care and healthcare product stores, 132,000 sporting goods, hobby and bookstores, 91,000 furniture and home furnishing stores, 92,000 general merchandise stores, and 80,000 electric and appliance stores. I could go on, right? There's lots of other types of retail. The point is, there are a lot of stores out there. Retail is a big, big industry. right? And RFID is about to transform it. Might not be this year, might not be next year, might not be the year after, but think about this. There are lots of companies that have already talked about their deployments, Macy's and others that have talked about what they're doing. There are a lot of other retailers who aren't talking about what they're doing. And at some point, the people who are being asked to tag for the companies that are doing it will say to themselves, wait a second, we're tagging 50, 60% of our inventory for the people who are doing it, Macy's and others. Why don't we just tag everything? Because in fact, when you get to 50, 60%, it's cheaper to tag everything. Because when you're tagging 50%, you've got to maintain 2 inventories. That's a pain in the neck. So if you tag everything, you don't have to worry about different inventories. You get more volume discounts on your tags, so you just tag everything. Well, now if you tag everything, there are stores that are getting stuff in. So for example, if you're a sporting goods company and you make socks and sweatpants and you sell them to Macy's and others, you also sell them to sporting goods companies, and they're going to get tagged goods into their stores, and they're going to say, why don't we just do this? And so overnight, you start to transform the industry. But as apparel and retail ramps up, and you start putting readers in all those stores, and you start putting tags on all that stuff, what happens? Well, hardware prices come down. Companies are now producing far more tags and readers, so there's economies of scale. So prices come down. Performance improves because the companies that are making the RFID equipment now have much more money to spend on R&D, and they're spending a lot now, and they're doing a great job of creating some really good products. That will even be better. There'll be software solutions that will proliferate to address the needs of different types of retailers, different types of other industries as well, and the technology will get easier to deploy. And I think we're seeing that. One of the trends I feel this year is downstairs you're going to see more technology that's a little easier to deploy, and some of the focus of the community has not been on improving read range or things like that, but just making the technology easier to deploy and use. So it will become possible to track and manage everything as the technology goes through this massive evolution. Now, this is the question I don't have the answer to. I don't know how long it's going to take. I think we're getting very close to retail apparel going into the tornado and getting towards mass adoption. It could be a year or two away. It could be a little bit more than that. But as I said, there's a lot happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. And the smart companies are preparing. They're learning, they're getting involved, they're saying, okay, let's start with a pilot, let's learn, let's do this in a smart way, let's think about our strategy. If you're here and you have an all-access pass, I would encourage you to come to my strategic workshop on Thursday. I speak about how to develop a strategy, how to roll out the technology in a way that's good for your business, that's smart, where you're not throwing money at the technology, hoping it's going to work. It's worth doing it. Playing catch-up is very hard because when this technology takes off and you're forced to do it, by that time, a lot of the companies that make the best technology are really maxed out. The systems integrators who have the knowledge of how to deploy the solution, they're maxed out. And you wind up going with somebody who really doesn't know the technology that well, who jumped into RFID recently because they saw a business opportunity, and you wind up working with somebody who's not as good. So playing catch up is very, very hard. And I saw that in the internet days, and I think it's much smarter to start early. And of course, you're here, so that's a sign that you're starting early. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that puts things in a little bit of perspective for you. I know I talk fast. I'm from New York. I can't help it. I always talk fast. So thank you very much. If you have, I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions, and then I want to get to Dr. Hardgrave because he's a great speaker, and you're going to want to hear from him. Do we have any questions? Man, I did a good job. Oh, okay. Yeah. Wait for the mic. He's coming with the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Where do you see RFID technologies affecting the security in the manufacturing industry? How does security play a role in deployment of RFID technologies?
Security how? What are you referring to?
So in the manufacturing technologies, so I'm from a manufacturing industry, so lot of times we see the data has to be it has to be in some way difficult to interpret from the others. There might be more software that is deployed. It doesn't have to cross the DFS zone, etc. So a lot of times when I go out to the manufacturing companies, they do question about how can we preserve the data security so that nobody can hack into the readers or the gateways or the antennas. So how do you see that evolving as RFID is catching?
So originally, the view of MIT was that you have a passive tag with a serial number, and anybody can read it. And you didn't need to keep it secure because basically it was in your supply chain, in your manufacturing plant. But as you get into open supply chains, you do have issues with, potentially putting some kind of virus in user memory on a tag, for example, or hacking into a reader and getting access to information. It's a multi-layered solution, so there's not one simple, here's what we're doing and it's going to fix the problem. So you need, we have a new standard for EPC Gen 2, V2 that includes more security on the tag. Vendors are working on, upgrading their own readers so that those readers are more secure. And then, of course, the software is a big element, and the hacking of the network. So I think it's something that is not a problem today, but it's going to increasingly be an issue, and the industry is, I believe, ahead of it and taking steps to try to address those concerns. And I think it's a good question to ask to some of the tag and reader manufacturers downstairs. Okay, we'll take one more question if anybody got one. Nobody? Okay, good. Let's get Bill Hargrave out here. Let me do my proper introduction.